I imagine that most of you have heard of lucid dreaming. Has anybody ever had a lucid dream? Some of you, yeah, many of you. For those of you who haven't had a lucid dream, it's a very simple thing actually. It's when you're dreaming and you suddenly realize, I'm dreaming. And yet you keep dreaming. And so when you're lucid and you're dreaming, all of a sudden what's happening in your dream isn't really of great concern anymore. And in a very simple way, awakening to our true nature is very much the same thing, but it's becoming lucid in this state, in this dream. If you imagine that you're having a dream, just imagine you're in your bed having a dream. And you're having a dream called you. Not unlike most dreams, because in every dream you've ever had in your life, have you ever noticed how you're the central character? Every dream you have in the middle of the night, it's about you. Right? So you're the central character. So this dream would be no different. You're the central character. So imagine that you're dreaming and you're the central character. And in this dream, you're a spiritual character. You've been bitten by the disease of spirituality, which is a disease, which is something you want to get over as quick as possible. It's like having the flu. People think that the whole spiritual thing is something to indulge in the rest of their lives. It's really a sickness. It's a useful sickness. It's a necessary sickness in many ways, but it's still a sickness. It's something you want to be cured from. And the cure for spiritual interest is called awakening. That's the cure. Right? Spirituality is sort of, in its best, is the medicine. We take spirituality to be true health. Do you know what I mean? But it's sort of, that would be as silly as when you get pneumonia and they give you antibiotic and the antibiotic cures you. And then you think, well, good health is antibiotics. So I'll take antibiotics forever. The antibiotics will start to destroy you. You see what I mean? The antibiotics aren't true health. They might help restore you. But they're not what it's all about. Like spiritual teachings. They're like antibiotics for the disease called, I want to wake up. You see what I mean? But when you go to the hospital and you get antibiotics for an illness and you get well, you don't put the bottle of pills on an altar and light incense to it, do you? Pray to it. Right? The real thing is the health you feel inside, and you can't put that up on the altar. But that's what we do in spirituality generally. Right? It's like we take the medicine and we worship the medicine instead of the health. So there you are in your dream, and you're a spiritual seeker. You've been bitten by the disease of spirituality. And you spend many, many years of your life in your dream seeking a way out of the confines of what it's like to be a human being, to be a me. Because being a me is a very dicey proposition, is it not? It can be wiped out at any time. That's why even when you're dreaming at night, your me is insecure. A monster could jump out of any corner. A bus could flatten you at any moment. Somebody could say they don't like you and send you into an existential crisis. You never know, right? So taking yourself to be a me, even when you dream at night, is a very threatening, very insecure state to be in. So there you are, being a me in a dream, a particular person in your dream, bitten by the bug of spirituality, going to various teachers, looking at various teachings. And one day, something pops into your dream and simply says, get off it. Look, this isn't real. You're dreaming this whole thing up. You're baking this whole batch of cookies up. This isn't actually real. And of course, then the first thing, you of course assume that person's an idiot. Either an idiot or enlightened. One or the other. Probably both. And the first thing you ask is, how do I wake up then? Do you see? And what's the person going to tell you? Put yourself in their position. You've popped yourself into somebody else's dream now. Just assume you're the reality. You've noticed somebody's dreaming and they're lost in their dream. And so you decide to go into their dream. Now, if you go into their dream, what are you going to have to do to get into their dream? To be noticed. What are you going to have to do to be noticed in their dream? You're going to go in somebody else's dream. What are you going to have to do to be noticed? You're going to have to put on one of these ridiculous costumes, right? The best way to be noticed by human beings is to be a human being. You don't have to be. You could become a tree or a rock, but most people don't listen to trees or rocks. Unless you're like Moses, then you listen to burning bushes. But most people don't. They'll listen to human beings. So you're going to have to, if you're the enlightened one, you incarnate, come into somebody else's dream that you know isn't real. Right? And what are you going to say to them? What are you going to say to them when they say, how? They say, how? No, wait, just wake up isn't good enough, they're going to tell you. Right? That's what they're going to tell you. They're going to say, that doesn't help me. Tell me what to do. Now, from your perspective, is that going to help them? Tell me what to do. They've already been told what to do 100 times, right? They've been doing what they've been told to do, but it hasn't woke them up. Because telling them what to do just buys into their dream. It just dries into that they are that little character. Tell me what to do. What are you going to say to them? Stop baking cookies. Good. That's the Zen approach. That's the equivalent of hitting someone over the head with a stick, right? What's that? Die. That would be good too. Yeah. Then they say, how? You're in a dream, right? They say, I've heard that before. What does that mean? I can't help you. Now that I like. That's good. Yes. Make the dream so miserable. Ah, that's a very good one. It's very effective, isn't it? Often that's when we tend to wake up, isn't it? When you have a nightmare at night, we often wake up in the middle of the nightmare simply because it's so awful. It's so absolutely terrible. Not always, but sometimes. Don't believe your thoughts. Oh, no, that's going to be a challenge to them, isn't it? Yeah, that's going to be a real challenge. That's a good one. Ask them who or what is dreaming. Now we're getting to the heart of it. Huh? Starting to sound familiar now? That's most important. Ask them if they want to wake up. And there's a link that's almost always missed between this state of being me, who is in a dream, which just means in a personal trance. There's a link between that and that lucidness and that awakeness. There's a link. And of course the link is very simple. The link is that the awareness that's looking through that little dream character as it looks around and encounters the contents of its environment, The awareness that's looking around is actually the exact same awareness that becomes lucid. It's not a different awareness. The exact same awareness that's looking through that little character's eyes and taking in the whole environment is exactly the same awareness. That if they turn their attention into that awareness, it's like it comes right out of them. And it's not a different awareness. If they were just to turn their attention into their own, what they think of as their personal awareness, in the most simple way, then that awareness can easily just slip into universal awareness. And then that awareness is lucid, which means it's not caught in the character. I like the lucid dream metaphor because when you become lucid, the dream continues, doesn't it? Now, I don't want to get into that nonsense, that sort of, egoic sort of new age nonsense that you've become lucid in your dreams so you can control them. Like to have celestial sex and God knows what. People become lucid at their dreamings and then their egos just learn how to control it. This is not what we're talking about in any way. Because when most people lucid dream, the one thing they forget is they say, hey, I'm dreaming, but they still think they're the one in the bed. So to be lucid in that sense isn't the same as waking up. Because they woke up from that dream, but they haven't woken up from this dream. So when consciousness wakes up, and you see, if you meet that little character that's dreaming, that wants to wake up, you see, you're going to encounter a character much like you are or have been in the past, which is that character is going to believe that it needs to do many things in order to wake up, right? It's going to believe it must do many, many things to wake up. Even though your own experience has taught you time and again that every time you go to sleep at night and you have a dream, you don't have to be a good person or a nice person or a selfless person to wake up, do you? If you did, you'd be in bed the rest of your life. You wake up at times in the middle of your dreams when you're being an absolutely horrific character, right? And you wake up when you're being an absolute saint. Awakeness actually doesn't care. It's not waiting for anything particularly to change. All it cares is, are you awake or are you asleep? And all the reasons why we need to delay something in order to wake up are just part of the dream state. They just reinforce the dream state. This is what I got to do in order to wake up, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this. And it's all predicated on the belief within the dream. And none of it's true whatsoever, right? You can become lucid at any time. You can become lucid in a heavenly dream, in a hellish dream, in a boring dream, in an ordinary dream, in a great dream, in an awful dream. It doesn't much matter. Now, the funny thing that happens when consciousness wakes up to itself, and you realize that you are the consciousness, you are the awareness, the dream still goes on. It's like having a lucid dream. You realize you're dreaming, the dream still goes on. It just keeps going. But as soon as you become conscious that you are not limited to just that little character, right? All of a sudden the perspective is totally different, isn't it? There's not a sense of heaviness to it. Because you realize what happens to this little character isn't particularly important. If you've ever had one of those lucid dreams like being hit by a car, those are particularly fun because you find out you can be totally wiped out. Your bones break and your blood splatters, and the lucidness is kind of going, I'll be damned. Wow, what a trip. If we're not lucid, of course, that's an absolute disaster. It's called death. So this Dream continues. This me is still there. The me doesn't disappear. This fallacy that this me disappears upon awakening, it's just as ridiculous as when you become lucid in a dream that the dream disappears. And that the character called you disappears. It doesn't disappear. It's still there. And it's just going on about its way. The difference is it doesn't much matter now. Things don't matter so much. And after a while of being lucid, of being outside the character, it gets a little boring. At first it's great. It's wonderful not to be stuck inside of this thing called you, to realize that this me is actually inside of awareness. Awareness is not inside of the me. But after you've been outside of the me for a while, you've been awareness, it's kind of, once you've gotten over being fascinated with your own freedom, there comes a time when it's kind of time to jump back into the suit. Ill-fitting, silly, quirky, strange, but what the hell, that's the only one you got. Right? So you kind of let consciousness slip back in there. Right? Now, if you're like most people, you're kind of afraid to do that because you remember the last time you let this awareness slip in there, you just went, right? Trance. As soon as it got to a certain point of intimacy with the character, you went into a trance. And so there's often a hesitancy, a fear that, man, if I do that, I'm just going to go back asleep. And yet, that's actually the natural function. It's a natural way that awakeness moves eventually. Is it kind of, part of it kind of slips back in there. And as it slips back in the character, there's still weird stuff going on. Right? Now, a lot less weird stuff than before you became lucid. As you became lucid, a lot of that contradiction fell away. But usually not all of it. So awareness kind of comes back in, and there's still messy stuff going on in there. Right? And as soon as you touch that messy stuff, as soon as awareness touches that messy stuff, your tendency is going to be like to touch a hot coal and go, ooh, I'm out of here. I'll just transcend back into the expanded awareness, right? But something keeps drawing you. Right? Something keeps drawing you. No matter how much the remnant of your ego wants to stay in some totally transcendent state, you start to realize sooner or later that the transcendent state itself is actually pulled, fascinated with appearing as this character. Mm-hmm. If this doesn't make any sense, don't worry. It will. So then what starts to be met is whatever's left of the inherent contradictions within that character, that me, are going to be seen, are going to be met, are going to be seen through, are going to be allowed to actually open themselves up to be experienced, to flower and then settle. You know, it's kind of like a flower, literally. Flower opens all the way, and then what happens? The petals fall. What happens if you have a flower and a bud, and you cut it off, and you put it in your vase, and you forget to put water in your vase? What happens to the bud? Does it open? No, it just wilts, falls on the ground, but it's still there, right? It's still, we could say, not open. It hasn't flowered and fallen away into the emptiness. And so everything within you is inherently designed to flower and then fall away. Actually, to flower and fall awake. Flower and fall awake. Flower and fall awake. Flower and fall awake. So that more and more and more this lucidness, this consciousness can function through that character at the same time that it's out. It's out and it's in. It's outside and it's inside. You as the consciousness are outside. Everything is within you. The whole universe is within you. And at the same time, you're inside. And the more the contradictions in the character fall away, the more that this consciousness can be in that character without going into a trance again. You see, the more muck there is in there, the more tendency to trance. The personal trance really gets energy when there's any resistance to what's coming up. Because the part of awakening, when you get a glimpse of true nature, when you get a glimpse of yourself as the pure awareness or the pure consciousness, when you get a glimpse of that, what you don't know at the time, but you find out later, is that it's as if this jar inside of everything you've repressed, the jar lid is removed. And you don't know it for a while, for an hour, a day, a week, a month, a year, 2 years, 10 years. But this has been taken off. And then all the unrealized beings within you, they're rushing. It's rushing out. And where is it rushing? It's rushing towards the light. But guess who's the light now? You. Right? I mean, you rush towards the light. Why shouldn't everything that's still in confusion and pain and now it's rushing to the light, but now you're it. And if there's any resistance to that, then there's the power of you resisting what's arising can very easily send you back into trance. When you realize more deeply, of course, you will go into trance, right? For moments, for minutes, hours, days, weeks. You never know, right? But you will come out of trance. It'll be a spontaneous event. Once you have tasted truth, tasted yourself, you cannot stay in trance indefinitely. It can't happen. Not really. It might happen for longer than you'd like. And it only happens when you take what's arising as true or you resist what's arising. Because everything that arises in there, all those that vasanas, the conditioning, those assumptions, those beliefs, those prejudices, those resentments, those blames, those shames, all of that that's arising is arising so the truth of it is seen. Have you noticed? Awareness is letting it happen. You might not, your concept of you might not want to let it happen, but awareness is letting it happen, isn't it? Awareness is pretty much let everything that's ever happened happen, which is ego's little problem with awareness. Ego likes the idea of unconditional acceptance and love and all that stuff. And then it realizes, my God, this awareness that's been here has actually been unconditionally letting everything happen that ever happened. And then the ego goes, I'm not sure I want that now. I want it as long as it was for me. So I say that because there's a great tendency of the mind to think, now I'm going to do it. Now, my job as a me is to accept what arises. No, your job as a me is to not accept what arises. That's what you've always done as a me. You're very good at it, like all other me's. We're extremely adept at not accepting what is, right? So if we now take this project, if we ask the me to do what only awareness or consciousness can do, we're setting the me up for failure, right? We're asking it to do something it's not prepared to do. That's why I say, don't set up, now I'm going to accept what is as something that you're going to do, you as the me. Notice that you as awareness are the acceptance of what is. You have no other choice. Awareness doesn't even need to accept because it can't not accept. It's impossible for awareness itself to not accept. You see? Even if you don't accept, you notice that awareness has allowed that to happen? Your whole life? As long as you wanted to do it? Awareness has allowed you to not accept? Do you see? So that true acceptance is a fact. It's not something the me does. Because consciousness, when it's awake, acts very differently than the me. Its motivations are completely different than the me. That's why what's left of the me often goes through this period of confusion, when all of its sort of personal motivations fall away. Have some of you started to have your personal motivations fall away? Like, why am I going to work? Why am I in this job? Why am I with you? Honey, why are we together? Why do I get up in the morning? I don't know whether I should go for a walk. I like walks, but see this. You start to actually realize when the personal self starts to crumble that almost everything that we did, literally, almost everything, to the way we got out of bed, to the work we did, to the way we related to people, was completely centered around self-centeredness, which doesn't make it bad. It's just the way it was, just self-centeredness. What's in it for me? And what's in it for me starts to fall apart. And this confusion can come in. Why do I do anything? The motivation, the self-centered motivation starts to fall away. For a lot of people, this can be a very confusing time. Friend calls you up, they have the latest drama. You know, well, guess who left me today? And there's nothing in you that cares. You see? Not that you don't feel compassion for them, but there's nothing in you that actually cares to be part of this illusion, this drama of blame and this and that, and you're no longer interested in the Ricky Lake show. Ricky Lake show is one of those obnoxious talk shows on TV that are so popular now, where they drag out the most pathetic human being they can find. That's the most deeply caught in the trance human beings possible. My take on it is this, is that most people love that because it makes them feel like, at least I'm not that screwed up. Right? At least I'm not in that deep of a trance. By comparison, I'm not doing so bad, So, of course, this is a place that one can get stuck, too. People think just because they have a glimpse of truth, they can never get stuck. You can. You can get stuck in this sort of emptiness of personal concern. And it's very freeing at first, but then it starts to become dry. That's what the sort of spiritual winter becomes. It's dry. Just to have the lack of personal motivations, it's freeing at first, but then it's kind of like, so what? Where's the juice? I wish I had $1 for everybody who got to that place, who said, but Adya, what about the juice? What about the passion? I want to go back, Of course, at that point, I usually say, go ahead. And then they go, well, not really. Because this flower of self really has to lose all of its petals. It really has to drop away before the next movement really starts to happen. And now, for some people, this actually takes quite a long time. For some people, what I'm talking about is just sort of very, very quick. You never know. It can happen in seconds or years. Everybody's sort of different. And then, when this lack of self-concern and this dryness comes, of course, this dryness usually comes because the revelation isn't totally complete. Because as long as we realize ourselves only to be the lucidness, the awareness, the consciousness, then life starts to feel quite flat. And so the dryness actually comes from a lack of seeing the totality of truth, of not seeing what this thing called life actually is. That although we can call it a dream, to call it a dream tends to, in most people's minds, devalue it, right? When spiritual teachers say, this life is a dream, it's an illusion, in most people's minds this is instantly devalued. And of course, a lot of teachings very overtly do devalue this life, which actually comes out of an illusion itself, either an illusion or just an attempt to get people to wake up. It can come from either one. But it's only when we start to see that this life, this dream, these forms are actually expressions of consciousness. In one direction, awareness is pure awareness, emptiness without form, pure spirit, pure consciousness. On the other direction, awareness is displayed as form, as life, as bodies, minds, trees, as this thing called a dream, whatever you want to call it. That's the expression of this consciousness. And only when we start to really grok that inside does this thing that we just woke up from, we start to see this is an expression of awareness. And then this very existence starts to have a real richness to it. It starts to actually have a deep, deep value. There's a deep sense of meaning, meaningfulness. A meaningfulness of this is God in expression. This is God in expression. How much more meaning could you possibly want? You see, than to realize this is the divine in expression. As messy and strange and weird as it is, this is the divine in expression. And there's a richness to that, and such a deep appreciation for that. And at the same time realizing that if it all disappeared, which it will, that nothing's actually lost. That there's an impossibility of anything really being lost. Like a wave in an ocean. When the wave disappears, what's really lost? Is anything really lost? That doesn't mean that waves aren't beautiful and valuable and wonderful expressions of the ocean. But when they subside, it's not a disaster. It's not an existential crisis for the ocean. You see? It might say to itself, boy, I really love that wave, and I might miss that wave for a while. And that was a really, really nice wave, and God, I'm really kind of sorry to see it gone. But be completely lacking in the illusion that anything is essentially missing, that anything could essentially come into existence and disappear out of existence. And this knowing, this seeing this vision of what's really true, really takes hold and starts to animate our humanity. Because it seems to me if there is any point, if we can say there is any point to this human existence, it is so that this source can experience itself as this existence in an awake way, in a conscious way. And so the strange paradox is that we need to wake up out of form so that we can finally come into form. We need to wake up from ourselves so we can finally fully be ourselves. You see? Jesus couldn't fully be Jesus until he realized the Christ. Siddhartha couldn't be Siddhartha until he realized the Buddha. His Buddha nature. It freed Siddhartha up. And it also freed the Buddha to operate through Siddhartha. Do you see? The Christ freed Jesus up to be what he really is, and also freed Jesus up to be an expression of the Christ. And so it is with every being. And this is, of course, the great pressure of evolution. It's called the spiritual yearning. This great pressure you feel to become conscious, to become awake, to realize what you are. And the amazing thing that it all begins with something so simple and so easy to miss. That the little person called me in this little identified dream, that its link to the universal awareness is this thing called what we think of as my individual awareness, that I am aware. And only when attention is turned there, and you can see within that individual, everything in that individual thinks that there's something more important, right? There's something more important. I have 1,000,000 problems to solve before I can do that. I got to get myself together. I got to feel good about myself. I got to do this. I got to do that. I don't know what I have to improve my spiritual, hue, halo, whatever. Right? I got to be liked by everybody. I got to find the perfect lover. I got to do something's always more important than turning attention back upon itself, because that is the portal. That's the consciousness that's universal. It's just appearing to be very personal. And when that simple awareness is turned back upon itself, it's sort of like it goes back through this hole, and the same awareness that you thought was yours, and this little thing ends up to be actually the universal consciousness. Has that wonderful, wonderful line. The first time I read it was by Nisargadatta. It was the first time I actually felt that I read it and I went, that's it. Finally, I read something that puts my experience exactly into the most beautiful phrase I've ever heard in my life. Perfect expression for me. And it was this sort of what's become a famous phrase for him. I didn't know it was famous till I just bumped into it in a book, where he said, when I look inside and see that I'm nothing, that's wisdom. When I look outside and see that I'm everything, that's love. And between those two, my life turns. To this day, I've never found a more beautiful expression of the direct realization, full realization of what we really, really, really are. And the realization, the movement of it will never be satisfied until we look in and see that we're nothing. That's wisdom. That's great freedom. And it's never going to be complete until we look out, till that emptiness looks out upon this and sees that this awareness is everything. And that's love. Nothing and everything. Everything and nothing. The universal reality and this little tiny me walking through life. And to realize it's actually the same. It's one.